Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of our review. You know, watching the previous video, I came to realize that I might have a little bias for Ali Matters. I also see now that she might be the second main character in a sense. It's between Jean and Ali. Yeah. Anyways, so there's a lot of things that has happened, and something so major has happened that I just can't continue. I feel like the only motivation I'd have to continue would be, I don't know, maybe how people react to this video as well. Like maybe people watch this video a lot and I don't know, maybe they like people want to see the story progress, but if not, I might not complete the book because that's just me. Once something is just too much for me, I stop and I pretend it doesn't exist. Hey, me, I didn't have something to come on. This is not a laughing matter, actually. So before we even go too far into inferences, our major event of the last section was that Jane and Jane and Gavin were pretending not to, know or recognize the fact that Jamie did that to his teacher, Ali. And then I feel like Ali has an idea because Jamie giving her the CD has probably written a note for her before, and his penmanship is too distinct. I didn't put it up in the last video, but I'll make sure to put up Jamie's like writing and all of it up here. Where I stopped was where they both go to church. That's Jamie and Gavin. And Jean is at home, reeling from her conversation. Gavin asking her to quit her job, she bargaining with him for time, and eventually sort of coming to an agreement with him that she was going to quit. Jean confronts Jamie. She's also angry and she doesn't know where the anger is. She says, was the anger directed at Gavin, at Jamie's friends, or just at myself and the life I could no longer pretend was perfect? And it's all, is everything okay, mom? You're zipping around like around this place like you're wired or something. And she just loses it. She's like, no, actually everything's not okay and you know it. My son continues to regard me with the same innocent gaze he always had. What's up, mommy? But you better make it quick. Blah blah blah. He has to go somewhere with his friends. And then she starts, did I say you did something wrong? No, it's those friends of yours, James. Sometimes I don't trust those kids. Anyway, she's trying to like beat around the bush a bit with him, but her anger is making it not so light-hearted for Jamie to go along with. So he's just like, what happened? Like, what's the issue? Is it drugs that you're suspecting me of? And she's like, no, it's not drugs, something else that could hurt or even scare somebody, another person. Jamie was like, see, if you don't want to be straightforward with me, I'm just going to go. I know what you did to Mrs. Martha's shit. Didn't you think I'd recognize your handwriting? The red flush that rinsed Jamie's cheeks and neck made denial impossible. He was so transparent, I thought. How would he ever handle the police? I guess I had a little crush on her or something in Malta, but I'm not the only one. A lot of the kids think Mrs. Martha's hot. A little crush? So you pour blood or something that looks like it on her music and you change her title to Dead Sweet. It was a joke, mom. He keeps trying to pass it like, what, you actually think I meant it like a threat? Well, no, I mean, of course not. But someone else, someone who didn't know you. God, Jamie, didn't you think how it might sound? Like as she's confronting him, because she's not used to confrontations, she's bad at it, as we can see from previous chapters. She's bad at it, she sucks at it. So, give the person an out before the person has a chance to come clean. But here, Jamie just like comes clean. He's like, I did it, but I didn't mean any harm. And she's like, what else would you mean if not harm from what you did? He tries to play on her emotion, saying, I didn't mean to truly, like, and you believe me, don't you? That kind of thing. And she starts making herself agree. She's like, yes, I believe you, But then his friends come over and he has to leave. And he's like, we'll talk about it later. Anyway, she goes to pick Ali as usual from her house, and as she's on the ride over, she's gaslighting herself as usual. Maybe in this case, Gavin was right. She had overreacted talking about Ali. While her rapt audience looked on, she had played little drama on stage for all it was worth. Forgetting that she herself, she collapsed, so she fainted when she saw it. So I don't know who is the drama queen here. She gets there and she sees Ali's looking as usual, awesome and everything, and she's like, the sight of her dramatic outfit only added to my irritation. Did she ever consider how her actions impacted on others? And it's like, in what context, Jane? What are you talking about? Is it like she's to blame for what Jamie did or something? Ali is just usual. She doesn't know it. She doesn't notice anything different about her friend. Yeah, and she's like, I've been so worried about you. Did Gavin tell you I called? Because she called that Sunday. She didn't go to church and didn't leave the house. And Jean, as usual, faced with such like genuine concern, and emotion and warmth, she feels tempted to spill everything to Ali. She's like, she wants to tell her about her reliance on the pills. She wants to tell her everything she knows about Jamie. She wants to tell her about, just everything that's going on in her life. I consider spilling it all, including the dark truth that lay at the center of my marriage. That after many years of subtle intimidation, fear had become my natural climate. The climate in which I was raising my son. Who cared if we were late for school? I would tell all the secrets, all the lies I had stored up for so long. So now, here we see Jean kind of helping us to put into perspective already. I'm sure people that are following the story already like can see it, but we can put it into perspective that Jean is also a liar. I titled the last video "A Liar and a Pretender Meet." Like, if you are pretending, you are also lying. You get, like, it's just another word for lying. The difference is, like, you might be lying in context. Like, maybe you're lying to somebody, but at the heart of pretense is a lie. So she's also a liar. So that means this liar's diary now can be, I think it's a title that is meant to throw us off. But I don't want to give anything away. Let's just keep going. She put on her false smile and looked at Ali. She said, really, everything is fine. Oh, so chapter 10. In chapter 10, Jean gets a call at school that Jamie is involved in a fight. And it's not like he's beating somebody up. Somebody really beat him to pieces, whatever. Then another call came in also for her. Who called her? It was Judge Martha. Judge Martha called her and invited her to lunch, which she very, very reluctantly, she gave every excuse under the sun, but he was persistent, like in that kind of gentle way that, you just can't resist somebody that cares about you, like somebody that obviously has no malice for you, especially somebody that has like a father figure. So she goes along with him and she's like, okay, fine, and they are going to meet at an Italian restaurant where they have lunch. And so when Jean gets there, Jean and George are speaking, and then she's on guard because something about Jean is that she's more of an observer looking in, into society. The way she is, she pays attention to so much body language, in the sense that when somebody's looking at her hoping to get a kind of response, she's always conscious of the truth that she constantly hides, the mask she wears as a wife of a doctor, as the mother of a son, as a secretary of the school. So she's very conscious of the mask that she puts on for society, to play a role in society. And so when she sees somebody that sees beyond the mask, or somebody that can perceive beyond her well placed mask, she's very, very on edge. Like throughout this lunch with George, she, at every step of her thought, she's always like, he's piercing eyes. So George now is an old man, I guess, sense like that. He has like old man sense. So and he has a very like a bird's eye view of Jane's practical like situation, domestic and mental and social and all. Lunch with George goes very interestingly because remember that George is a lawyer who went on to get a philosophy degree, but he's still a lawyer, okay? So he starts to tell Jean, like, Jean is expecting him to like ask her question about what happened that night of the concert, to throw suspicions at her of who could possibly have defaced his wife's music notes, or what the music sheets. Instead of that, he starts with something very seemingly mundane, and he starts to narrate a case he's handling. He says that a burglary happened. A teenager broke into an elderly woman's home. It was innocuous enough in the sense that he was just supposed to get in there, get the jewelry, and get out. But this woman woke up in the middle of the night, like in the middle of hearing the noise, and it turned into something much, much greater. As the boy had beaten her severely, breaking several fragile bones and leaving her face dramatically bruised. As George described the incident, I could almost see the frail old woman being led from the house by the niece who found her. She was hiding her face as if she were the one who should be ashamed. How can you help defend someone like that? That I said. So that means like George is defending this teenager. I asked, surprised by the outrage in my voice. Try to get him out of it by any trick in the book. Isn't that what you lawyers do? People like that boy, they deserve to be punished. I fumed. George took a leisurely sip of his wine, regarding me with those mysterious eyes of his. So I don't know if people can guess already like what George is trying to do. Old man says. Anyways, George smiled, like a perfectly normal reaction. In fact, I felt the same way when I first read about the case. However, when you see beyond the skeletal reports you get in the papers or the one I just gave you, you realize things are a lot more complicated. So I'm fittingly worried that this invitation to lunch might indicate a romantic interest. Relax, Jean, it's not that. Why? How? Complicated, what do you mean? I was just waiting for him to make an excuse for the boy so I could vent a little more of my unexpected rage. There are people whose whole life is a punishment. Kids who literally don't know the difference between right and wrong. People who know not what they do, to quote the master. That's like a biblical reference, whatever. And you really think that's an excuse for the kind of crime that was committed against that poor old woman? I said. I was already beginning, they're at lunch, she's having wine, which she didn't want to have, but George convinced her to have for a reason. Anyways, she starts to notice that George's suit is ill-fitting and is baggy, and she concludes that it's probably from all the trials of his relationship with Ali. No, not an excuse, just the truth. The complicated truth we try our best to simplify every day. So as he's saying this thing, he's dropping these lines, he's eating, like he's just like trying to adjust it so that Jane will not feel like she's being interrogated, so she'll be like, I don't know, there's something he's trying to bring, and I feel like you might get it. Didn't Ali mention you have a teenage son? Just like out of the blue. And Jean is at alert immediately. I chewed my breath slowly, feeling the color rising in my cheeks as I sensed George watching me intently, too intently. Jean emphasizes a normal teenage son, I said emphatically when I was able to speak. Living with Jamie hardly qualifies me to understand the kind of monster you described. Again, George shrugged. Some people would say the term normal teenager is an oxymoron. Adolescence itself is an aberrational time. He smiled. And then he offers her more wine, which she shakes her head and covers her glass. Like she's now like on edge, as Gavin likes to say. She was like tense. I was torn between the feeling that I should energetically defend my son from George's harsh generalizations and an almost desperate desire to change the subject. Continue to argue, and not argue in a sense, like it feels like a dance. The way I'm seeing it from George's perspective, it feels like he's doing a dance, this fragile, tenuous dance with this person, for something. She raises her voice at some point and she says, frankly, I find it insulting to lump a normal teenager like Jamie, and yes, there is such a thing, into the same category as the boy you're helping to defend. Jane is over it, she doesn't care. George is trying to like appease her and is like, oh, I'm so sorry, I've never been in a conversation with anybody like as attractive as my wife before, it's kind of whining and all of that. So Virgin is over it. She's like tense. She's like feeling everything about to sleep up, and she's also tipsy. Whatever. She was ready to leave, and George is like, "I'm sorry, I've kept you," and all of that. They go to the car park, and George is successful in making her like, getting what he wants to get from her, and still making her feel like he didn't get anything for her, because she concludes that obviously all this talk about abnormal adolescent psychology, which had made me feel so uncomfortable, was exactly what he had said it was. Nothing more than a man rambling on about his work. The mention of my son had been natural. Perhaps I'd even imagined the probing look I thought I saw in George's eyes. It's like, once again, it's either George was good at what he did, or Jean is, as usual, as is her habit, burying everything, pretending that something is not there, when something is very obviously there. She gets into her car, ready to leave. George is like, "Oh, one more question, Jean. One more thing. Like, the real reason I haven't told you the real reason I asked you to lunch." And she's like, confused. "The real reason?" "Yes," he replied. "The other night at the concert, just before you fainted, I caught a glimpse of your face. I don't think I've ever seen such sheer horror." I laughed nervously. My husband says I overreacted. It was probably nothing than a prank. But George was leaning on my car by then, pinning me to the spot with his eyes. Once again, Jean's fear or attentiveness to what his eyes are saying, or what his eyes were saying to her. "A student prank? I think we both know it was more than that, Jean." Instinctively, finally, I put on my sunglasses. So Jean has escaped. Phew, escaping from George's eyes. But whatever it was, I don't suppose we'll ever find out who did it. Standing up straight, releasing my car, George shook his head. "Oh, I don't know about that. Frankly, Jean, this whole situation, the break-ins at Ali's house, the incident with her music, I think it's more serious than we thought. The way you reacted, I thought you knew that too. There were a lot of things I would later chide myself for not saying at that moment. First of all, I should have denied the implication that I knew anything about the matter. And certainly I should have expressed my doubt that the incident with the sheet music had anything to do with the menacing occurrences at Ali's house. By the time I left the parking lot, I realized that nothing George had said at lunch was random or merely conversational, as he had dreamed. The talk about the troubled teenagers he was planning to defend, his sly questions about Jamie, all of it had been planned. Even his last minute question in the parking lot had been calculated to catch me off guard. As my hands clutched the wheel, I could feel the intensity of George's eyes fixed on my retreating car. Yeah, obviously, like I said, there was nothing unplanned about this launch with George. But things keep flowing along. Chapter 11 now. In this paragraph, this chapter starts with Jean kind of like introspecting about being alone at home by herself. You know, being in their very big house alone by herself. She mentions that how long had it been since I'd been alone for any length of time, really alone in a silent house, with no one to shield me from the lies I told myself day after day. It must have been years. Now we have to pay attention to this. Though Gavin's absences had grown increasingly frequent, he always made sure, like, that's what important. She mentions that Gavin's absences had grown increasingly frequent. And when she questioned him about it, he said, "Oh, I'm going for my medical orthopedic conference." When she presses him further, he goes with a mildly threatening tone. "Didn't I know there were constant advances in the field that he needed to keep up?" Though he was only 46. That confirms my theory that Ali and Gavin are age mates. Or yes, they are age mates. Though he was only 46, he was in danger of becoming a dinosaur in the work to which he had dedicated his life. Did I know what it was like to compete with a growing army of bright-eyed young graduates, to constantly feel you could be replaced? And all of this whole diatribe, she just relents, like she lets it go. So one time his conference is going to be held in Dallas or Cleveland or Cornfield, Iowa. All she did was just dutifully packing his clothes, dutifully taking the number of the hotel where he'll be staying in case of an emergency, and dutifully watching him leave, waving in a false cherry wave. Only when his car left did I breathe deeply, basking in the freedom that Gavin's absence allowed me and Jamie. But this particular weekend was different because Jamie was going camping with his friend, and they had been planning it for weeks, So she was scared. Like, she was separation anxiety, I feel. Jamie's like being sensitive towards her needs, and it's like, okay, you know what, I'll just stay at home. And she's like, no, 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 don't. Jean shows us, like, it gives us a bit of insight into Jamie's head, not really in his head, but what she knows about him. And she knows he's terrified of swimming because he's terrified to show his body. He's terrified of revealing his freckled chest and back, the sprawling vulnerability of his midsection, which he never admitted, which he tried his best to hide behind trendy loose clothing. Of course, Jamie never admitted his fears outright. Instead, he played the clown to his friends. So it's very interesting that the friends that Jean is always touting about, that, oh, Jamie is so social, Jamie's dear friends. And this friends thing is so, it's so irritating to me, because in later chapters, the way she uses friends as an excuse to not do something she should have done, when she knows right and well that this friendship between Jamie and this friendship between Jamie and these people is not friendship, it's more of a dynamic where he's the clown. He puts himself in self-deprecating sentences, or in a self-deprecating light, to amuse his friend, to make himself easy to be around. And I'm sure his friends will not hold back on the jokes, which he would just take as a good sport, and to be like, oh, Jamie's a good sport, and Jamie is always like ready. As much as he enjoys their company, he's always ready to like drop appointments, or meetings with them, at the drop of a hat, just to be at home with his mom if she wants. So that shows, like, it's not about, say, okay, he loves his mom too much. I think it's more of he shows more of, he's very much more attached to his mom than the idea of this friendship she keeps holding to is like in her head as something important for him, which I know she's trying to give him like a balanced social environment, because obviously she never had friends, you get. And when she puts it into perspective, I guess she'll be thinking she shouldn't let friendship, she shouldn't let her child, since her child is always an only child, like, she shouldn't let her child miss out on friendships and social activities, as a teenager, which she did not even have the chance, to enjoy. So I realized that Jamie's friendships are important to Jane, even much more than Jamie. Like, so, like, it's kind of annoying to see, because later on those friendships will end up being something. Let's just keep going. So, and she concludes that he feared the sight of his own body the way I feared being alone in my house. So, and again, we see it a lot that Jane makes a lot of parallels with Jamie. She makes parallels of his fears, she makes parallels with his vulnerabilities, she makes parallels with his relationship with his dad, she makes parallels with, so I feel like before Ali, Jamie was her friend in a way, which is wrong. Like, it's not wrong in the sense, like, if you want to be a friend to your child, or I've never had a kid before, I don't know how that works with parent and child, but I'm guessing, like, if you want to be a friend to your child, you have to understand that you have to make boundaries. You have to come to tell you certain things. You can't be a friend and a parent at the same time. Like, I don't know, it's kind of wonky, that kind of feel, but I don't know. But basically, I feel like Jean, for the longest time, had been holding on to Jamie, whether she was doing it consciously, or not. And I don't think, like, she had been holding on to Jamie as a friend, and Jamie too has been responding in kind, in that level of friendship. Friends bound by secrets, friends bound by lies, friends bound by pretense, and an overbearing father, or husband that holds, like, the hammer over their heads, like, every breathing, waking moment. Eventually, she convinces him, like, don't worry, I'm okay, we'll go, they hug and all of that. So what's interesting about this chapter is that Jean is at home alone, and she decides to listen to some music. Then when she put on the stereo player, she saw, like, she heard she my voice has gotten very much better than the last video, thank God. Thank me, not any God. Thank me. Yes. So but it's still like hooking different points, it's still catching different points. So I'll pardon me, please. She goes to pour herself wine and she listens to music as one does when they're alone in the house. But like the last thing playing on this on the stereo, because that's what they had then, was Paradise Suite. Paradise Suite is Ali's music. So she goes to pop the CD and she's labeled Ali AC Mothers. And she's so betrayed because she's like, did he go back there talking about him? Like, did he go back to her house to take this CD again? Like, what is going on? You know, like, it was so troubling to her. And it's funny because the way her brain starts from, I wonder how this mysterious melody had gotten into the house and why. Had Ali been here without my knowledge and left it in the CD player for me, thinking that she would surprise me? Like, you see how extreme her brain goes to make logic of things that is very off, that doesn't make any sense. Was it possible that Ali had given it to Gavin? So there's a theory here that her brain keeps, like, you know, when there's something in your head that you cannot really touch on, but it's there regardless, and you can't just put your finger on it. That is how the narration keeps on leading us, because it keeps on, there's a way she keeps on finding different things that kind of alludes that maybe Ali and Gavin are closer than normal, but we don't know, and we can't know because it's somewhere in Jean's brain. Let's keep going. She starts like spiraling about the possibility. After the Ali and Gavin thread of thought, she now goes on to Jamie, because it's Jamie that is the normal suspect. Almost troubling of all, did this disprove that Jamie truly was the one who had been sneaking into her house all along, that he had been there this very day? He, after stealing the disc, sat on this very couch listening to it furtively earlier that afternoon while I was at the grocery store? If so, why? Was he fantasizing about the woman who had written it? The woman whose bow drew such a brilliant spectrum of emotion from her violin? Did he feel he had captured another piece of her soul when he took possession of her music? Maybe Jean should like put all her energy in writing. And she has such a good flow of prose and description. You know, it's so beautiful, but it's also very crazy. No, of course not, I said vehemently. In the eerily empty house, Jane is not like that. He's a normal teenager. Normal girl, I wish I was a normal girl. That song is so heartbreaking. Yeah, I feel like I should make a playlist for this book, like Caesar's Normal Girl. She concludes that it was a prank. You know, there's nothing sinister going here, as she thinks of Judge Martha's probing eyes. As I spoke, I pictured Judge Martha's eyes watching me, skeptical eyes, probing eyes. So she's panicking and she runs out of the house. She's scared. When I looked back from the road, every room of the house was ablaze with light, as if my fear of being alone had been made visible for all to see. But whatever it was, I sped away as if I were escaping with my life. And she goes to a trendy bar named Hannibal. And she says something weird, like I went there to pretend I was Ali. Looking towards the bar, I saw a blonde mouthed, wide shoulders who resembled Jack Butterfield from the back. But when he turned around to look at me, he spotted a thick moustache and none of Jack's roguish charm. She smiled at him anyway. She starts to flirt with this mustache guy that she mistakes for Jack. No, why she pretends to be Ali. But then she chickens out because she thought of what Ali said when she was describing flirting with Brian Shigori. She said she was just destined to see what it would be like, you know, being with a man younger than her and all of that. So, and because of that, she feels she feels put off. The stranger was disappointed, but what can he do? She was grateful that she had avoided some tawdry experience that she would surely regret later. But she was also sad that there was no escaping her life after all. The drinks I downed too quickly had already made me dizzy, but I fortified myself with a third before I had the courage to go home, the courage to do what I knew I had to do. Walking through the first floor of my house, I turned the lights out one by one, until finally the only room that remained lit was Jamie's room. So she started. She started looking for, she scattered the room. No, she's actually a very good housekeeper. So she opened his room and put it back like neatly, because like Jamie expects his mom to clean his room. So like, so if his room is cleaned from the stash and the debris of like before he left for camping, he's not going to be suspecting anything, you know. But she searches and she searches, and she keeps saying that her son is a perfectly normal teenager. There's nothing. What exactly was I looking for? Nothing. I suppose I was looking for confirmation that what I told George was true. My son was a perfectly normal teenager. So she was hoping to find nothing to prove her case. So she looked under his bed, in the closet. See, there's nothing here, she said. She looked everywhere. She said, nothing you wouldn't find in any teenager's room. I stood in the center of the room with my hands on my hips, feeling satisfied that I had vindicated my son from an accusation that had been made only in my own mind. So she was ready to like call it a night, and then her eyes caught a shoebox. Shoebox that had been wedged behind the bookcase. Was just like she was scared. She flicked off the light in the room. She went to the bathroom, filled up the tub, added a lavender scented bubble bath. And she wanted to like ignore it. Like she didn't look at the box, she didn't open the box. She just wanted to have a bath to forget it. But she could not. So she left the tap running and went back to his room and opened the box. I was immediately assaulted by the sight of the newspaper clipping on top. Ali's face smiled back at me. Local musicians playing emerging artist series. The familiar caption read, "Of course I had clipped the same news article only a week earlier." She started to rationalize it. There was nothing so unusual about Jamie wanting to save a piece about a teacher from school, was there? But even as I sunk down onto the bed to examine the contents of the box more clearly, I felt something collapsing inside of myself. The weight of our family's collective lies pressing in on me. In a kind of trance, I pulled each item from the box. Small things I recognized as Alice, which Jamie had apparently filched from her house. The tortoise shell clips she used to hold back her heavy hair. A pair of dolphin earrings, one of the trademark turquoise pens she always used to grade her papers, and there were papers too, pieces of sheet music and grocery list, notes reminding herself of things she needed to do, an unfinished letter to Jack, which had been gouged childishly with a small knife in the same way the score for Paradise suit has been defaced. So she's there checking up in her bathroom is running over, which I feel like is kind of a symbolism of her state of mind. Like her brain is just like it has turned too much, you know, her emotions and the panic is probably spilling over basically, you know. And she started to think, you know, she started to like process it. She like the shock, you know, that she felt in finding this thing evolved. She said it quickly evolved into a need to protect Jamie. All I could think was that thank God I had found the box instead of one of Jamie's friends. I could picture their parents seriously discussing problems of the Cross family. Start thinking, oh, all the other housewives would be so happy to jump on this piece of evidence that her family was not okay. You know, they'll definitely be gossiping about her. She started making up all these scenarios where everybody, her housewife, like circle, they've all turned on her, you know, all of that and all of that. And then when she now like finally gained some presence of mind, she lit a fire in the fireplace and she burnt every single one of those items to flame and ash. It was so intense that after that experience, after doing all of that, she takes 2 pills and she sleeps like the dead till like midday, you know, which she says she has never done in her life, which is weird. Why would she not be able to sleep in a day in her life? So she wakes up to a call. The teachers calls her and it's Nora Bell. Nora Bell is calling her that, oh, have you heard? Have you heard? And she's like, she's just coming out from sleep, like, heard what's going on? And the woman keeps on like hemming and hawing, and she's like also irritated that Jean is not alert, you know, to what she's trying to imply. And Jean is like, I've not heard anything, bro. You know, like what is going on? And she dropped the bombshell. And the bombshell, the way Nora says it is that, so you haven't heard, with obvious relish. It's her boyfriend Jean talking about Ali, the shop teacher. They found him in that motel last night, like I say. And I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I thought maybe I could get in touch with Ali. It's like, tell me what is going on. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. What are you saying, Nora? Exactly what happened to Brian. That's what I'm trying to tell you, Nora said, her voice once again bristling with impatience and none of the compassion that I might have softened the blow she was about to deliver. The man hung himself, Jane. And then we go on to chapter 12. So continuing off, something major happens. Brian ended his own life, in the seedy motel where he stayed while he moaned over Ali. And it's terrible. They take it so bad. And by day I mean Ali and Ali and Jean. Like, it's so hard for me to pronounce Jean's name because it's not a common name I hear every day. And it's so confusing with the Jean. So I don't know. I might end up calling her Jean for the rest of this video. Just allow it, please. So Jane is horrified by the news and she feels like she has to leave. That's chapter 12. Chapter 12 is this whole scene where it's not a scene, but it's a whole sequence of events where Jane is seeking solace, seeking comfort, and she knows she cannot get it from Gavin or from Jane. So she runs to her friend's house. She goes to Jane. But then it's raining really badly, so she gets all beaten by the rain, and she feels like it's good for her because she deserves the lashing. Somehow she feels like she's connecting Brian's demise with Jimmy's behavior, and then there's Ali. So it's like just this whole crumpled mess in her head. Anyway, she makes it to her friend's house, but her friend is not around because her friend went for a musical performance, and we don't know if Ali has gotten the news yet, but somehow Jane is looking through the front door, nobody's at home. Then she goes through the side door of Ali's house and she breaks into Ali's house, which is very weird for me because, like, I don't know, I'm suspecting her, like, of being the person stalking Ali. My neighbor's dog is just being a pain in my ass, and it's not his fault, it's the neighbor that is at fault. Anyways, she breaks into Jane's house. Then she starts to go through Jane's things as a normal person, well-adjusted person would do. She goes through Ali's things. She goes through her music notes. She enters the music room. She comes out. She goes through her drawer, and then she finds Ali's diary. But Jane is in such a state of mind that I don't know. I don't, like she said before, she doesn't have any. She doesn't pay. She doesn't see any importance in Ali's diary. It's always that thing that is in her head that, oh, I want to know what my friend is thinking of, or prying to my friend's affair. But she's somehow in her friend's house when her friend is not at home. So I don't know how that works. Anyway, she pries through Ali's journal and she sees a few pages where Alice writes her name in capital, bold letters, and she's like, Jean, what's wrong with Jean? I'm going to put expressing some kind of frustration at Jean. And Jean is like, where did this like, what is all this, And as she's looking through her things, she hears the front door clicking open and she goes to hide. When she goes to hide, Ali is telling somebody that came to drop her off. His name is Marcus. He's a part of the quartet that she, or the orchestra that she plays with, that she performs with, and he usually drops her home like after they go and for an out of state, performance. So he drops her home that day, he tries to stay with her. She's like, no, don't worry, I'll be fine. I'll call my friend Jean. And Jean is hearing this and she's like, oh, my friend is looking, towards me. So it's like Ali has gotten news of Brian's demise as well. And so she waves up this person concerned, saying she has people she records that she should go, as in Jean. And Jean is still in a corner in Ali's house, just listening quiet, which is very fucking creepy. But Ali comes into the house. Then she makes a call, but she doesn't call Jean. She calls somebody. And we don't know who the person is, but Jean assumes it is George because she feels like George is Ali's rock. And so she's talking to George and she's like, oh, the incident. She mentions something like an incident with Brian. And Jean doesn't know what the incident is. I don't feel Jean can handle sensitive information in that sense. Anyways, Jean is still listening in, and Ali is so remorseful, not remorseful as much as she's expressing so much guilt and sadness and sorrow. And Jean is like, okay, this is my cue to leave. And then she walks back to her house. She doesn't drive to Ali's house, she walks to Ali's house in the rain. And then she walks back to the house again, also under the rain, goes to her house, and she sees Jamie, in the kitchen. Jamie did not ask where she was because I don't know, they just see her as always there. So he doesn't notice her absence in that sense. Anyway, Jamie is just like so excited to tell her, have you heard? Have you heard? And she's like looking at him, and he's like, oh, you not hear about Brian Shagari, all of that. And the way he's so excited about it, she lifts up her hand to slap him because this is coming on the heels of the discovery she made in his room. And as she lifts up her hand to slap him, Jamie is like shocked. In all of his 16 years, his mother has never tried to hit him before. So she lifts up her hand to slap him. She doesn't slap him though. She stops halfway. And then she's sad, and Jamie is sad. And Jamie is like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was not sensitive. It was really close to you, all of that. Anyways, she's like, we have to talk, Jamie. There's something going on. We have to talk about something. And that's when Gavin comes in. And Gavin's like, oh, what do you want to talk about? Like, tell me what is so wrong that you have to talk about. But Jean is not one to be silenced in this moment. She's like angry at Jamie and at the whole situation of her family, life. So she's like, Gavin is like all intimidating and all that, but she doesn't care. She looks at Jamie and she's like, we have to talk, this, that. And Jamie's like, well, I have to go to my friend's house. And she's like, do you really go to your friend's house? Like, do you go to your friend's house? What is why you leave the house? And it's like, why are you accusing me like this? Jamie is hot, and he's angry and all of that. And Gavin too is, for once, is on Jamie's side because he's like, where is this coming from, Jean? Why are you so afflurry and all of that? But Jean is like, no, we have to talk about this. Where does he go? When he says he's going to meet his friend, does he go to meet his friend? Gavin is like, you know what? Just go to your friend's house. His friend's name is Toby, and just spend the night there. And make sure you come on time for school tomorrow. And Jean is like, no, don't let him go. She's making a whole scene. And Jamie just like gets angry at her. He's hostile, looking at her, gazing at her with so much hostility in his eyes, which she feels is new, which is strange. Like, he's a teenager. You should be getting hostile looks at this age. So Gavin makes sure that Jamie gets out of Jane's clutches, and Jane is like so defeated and all of that. She just like she can't stay in the house one more second. So she goes upstairs, she bypasses Gavin, she goes upstairs, she packs an overnight bag, and she goes out again. She doesn't stay at home and she goes back to Ali's house. And when she goes back to Ali's house, Ali welcomes her so warmly. Both of them are actually so like they feel so close to the situation. So they are like hot, and Ali's saying a lot of things. She's saying how she feels guilty, how she feels responsible, that she knew that Brian had problems, but she not like really push for any sort of help for him. She just kind of ignored him, like, okay, maybe his madness will go away or he'll get tired of her. But like she said, she's not going to let it pass anymore, and then anybody she sees going through something, she's going to make sure it's an issue. So at saying this kind of thing, Jean feels very attacked because she's always sensitive, to the fact that Ali sees through her all her defenses, all her masks, all her lies. And she's like, oh, like me, And but Ali is like looking at her. Anyway, Jean is all accusatory though. Jean is like, you should not have slept with him. And Ali was like, I was just doing him a kindness. She felt like sleeping with him would make him like cool off or something. But Jean is like, borderline slut shaming her, which just makes Ali like more despondent. Like she just loses it again, and and then Jean is like remorseful, like, oh, I'm so sorry. I know you're going through a lot. I know you're thinking a lot about it, and I know you already feel responsible. I don't mean to add to this shame and all of that. Anyways, they are talking, and Ali's like inconsolable to an extent. So Jean, helpful friend as she is, she brings out her pills and she gives one to Ali. She says, maybe if you take this pill, you'll be able to sleep tonight. So Ali's like out of the blue, like she just reacts so harshly. She takes the pill and she's like, Jean, is this what you do when you want to avoid situations? You take pills. Like, who is prescribing this to you? You know, like she's all, according to Jean, she's all judgmental. But Ali's serious. She cannot tolerate drugs. And she's like, Jean should not avoid life by taking drugs, you know. As she says to Jean, she's like, as much as I'm sad though, I still want to feel the weight of what I am living. I don't want to numb it with drugs. And then Ali Jean is like, give me the drug if you're not going to take it. But Ali just throws it away in the trash and continues like reacting, like preaching to Jean. And Jean is just, she's like, okay, you know what, I'm going to take a shower, blah blah blah. And Ali's like, oh, as if you're running away. That's what you do. You run away. And Jane runs away literally to the bedroom where she takes a really hot scalding shower because she thinks it that Ali's right, you know, that she runs, she gets lost in her house routine, she gets lost in her job, she gets lost in a hot numbing shower, you know, to avoid thoughts or truth or conversations that she doesn't like. Finish showering, she comes back, they had this heart to heart moment, you know, they're talking. And somehow Ali brings up the topic of Jamie. She doesn't really say it, but she alludes to it that Jamie needs help, basically. You know, and she makes a very sensitive she gives up this empathetic approach in the sense that she says, oh, you know, when she was also like at a point in her life, she was just like Jamie. You know, she saw herself as a piece of shit whenever she looked at the mirror, whenever she looked in the mirror, you know, and she hated what she saw all the time, you know, and all that. And they're talking, and somehow Jean starts to cry. She cries because like everything is just so unbearable. Like she can't bury or hide anything anymore in front of her friends' genuine concern and sympathy, you know, despite her suffering so much and all of that. So anyway, they conclude. Jean decides in her heart that okay, she's going to schedule an appointment for Jamie the week, you know, because this is a Sunday now where the news of Brian's demise came in, and she decides to schedule an appointment for Jamie with a known psychiatrist, Dr. Erin Emory. On Monday, the principal gives them the day off, tells Ali and Jean to stay back home and that Jean should take care of Ali because right now, you know, a lot of people want to send a lot of mean, misdirected judgment and hate towards Ali. So best Ali just avoids it for now, like until the thing goes down. And Jean doesn't want to stay with Ali because she feels like Ali is always poking holes in her life and all of that. But the principal just basically commands her to stay. So Jean calls the doctor and they book an appointment for Wednesday at 10 a.m. and all of that. So all of this resolution, all of this, you know, being in the clarity of an environment that is not biased towards your constant gaslighting and intimidation and all of that, and fear from your husband, basically the whole family dynamics. Like it feels like Jean has her head on straight, you know, and so she has a lot of resolve that oh, she's going to do something, she's going to do something. So okay, she goes home, you know, back to her life, and she sits Jamie down for a heart to heart, and she directly accuses Jamie of everything that she has seen so far and her conclusion. And Jamie admits it easily, which also a surprise to me. Jamie admits it. He says, "Oh, you know, I am like I was just like it's just based off of a crush," and his mother is not having it. She says, "Why? Like, what kind of crush will make you want to make somebody terrified or involves harassing another person? Like you feel happy when you feel special when you terrorize a woman, you know, that kind of sentence." And Jamie is like, oh, I don't mean it now, you know, I've never mean anybody harm, you know, all of that and all of that. Jane, she's not his confrontation, you know, and the more Jamie speaks, the more she feels like she starts to rewire the thing in her brain. Like she starts to twist the whole thing and be like, okay, because Jamie is like flat out accepting everything. He's like, I'll do everything, mom. I'll go to um I'll go to the police. I'll apologize to Mrs. Martha. I'll go to the police. I'll give a statement. I'll probably not to do all of that. And for some reason, this whole ease of Jamie just like, being a kid and just, being honest about what he's feeling in that moment. But Jean, because I said that Jean identifies so much with Jamie. Jean, for some reason, begins to look at Jamie with this eye of, oh, when I was a child, I didn't have anything, you know, like her family was poor. People looked at them with pity. That even after her brother, especially after her brother passed, there was this tinge of this feeling of hopelessness that surrounded their living experience, and they were so poor. There was no money saved for college for her. She's just thinking this thing in her head while her son is like pouring out his heart to her, pouring out repentance to her. She's thinking these things in her head like, no way is it going to happen to her son. Like, people are not going to look on pity with her. Like, she's not going to put her son through such a, she implies that she's not going to put her son through that. Like, she won't be a helpless girl, confined by circumstances to be pitied by everybody around her. So somehow she reads that, oh no, Jamie doesn't need to take that sort of accountability. That if Jamie feels like he needs to talk to someone, because that's what Jamie says, like, the more he broke into Ali's house and he went through her things, or he stole some little things, trinkets from her. Like, the more he felt like two of them were playing a game, like both of them were talking to each other in that sense. And she's like, in her brain, after coming to all those conclusions, she's like, okay, she now tells Jamie, since you want to talk, like, you don't need to go to the police and tell anybody anything. But since you really need to talk to somebody, don't worry, I've scheduled an appointment with the psychiatrist for you. And he's like, you want me to go to a head shrinker or something? Like, what does he even say? She's like, yes. He was not like, okay, I'll do it, but you have to promise me something. And she's like, oh God, promise you what? And he says, promise me you won't leave me. The way he says it felt so foreboding when I read it. But Jean is not feeling it in that moment. She's caught up in her own idea of herself, seeing herself in Jamie, trying to correct the things that happen in her life with Jamie, through Jamie. So the way Jamie says it feels so foreboding, because she's like, leave you? I literally just slept over at my friend's place for one night. What do you mean leave you? So it's like, I don't know, it feels foreboding. Like, why would Jamie feel like his mother would leave him? Leave in the sense of, I feel like it's the idea of a divorce between parents, and maybe she abandons him to with his father or something like that. But like, I'm going too far, I'm jumping. So the story continues, and Jamie agrees, and she says okay. But before she can make the promise, Gavin interrupts. As usual, he comes back from work and he sees both of them, and she diverts the whole conversation. She's like, oh no, she's just talking to him about his algebra test that he did, blah blah blah. And he's like, oh good. And then Jamie's still looking at her like for the promise, like the agreement of the promise, and she finally like mouths it to him where Gavin cannot say that she promised. Of course, at the time, I had no real idea how much that promise meant to my son, or how much it would cost us both when I broke it. That's what happened in chapter 12 to 14. So now chapter 15, she goes back to work. She goes back to work. This chapter is important because we get to finally see why Gavin picked Jean to be his wife. Because I said already, if you watch the first video, you see where I narrated how Gavin and Jean met. But to me, it always felt like he singled her out, and it's like, what could have made him single her out? Because it didn't seem like it was this deep, like love at first sight energy. It just felt so calculated, but I wasn't like, there was no insight, because I've seen everything from Jean's perspective. You get, so since Jean is one narrating, obviously we will not know, she doesn't have any idea why her husband picked her. But finally that question is answered in this chapter, and it happens through a sequence of events. In the event where on Wednesday she goes back home to pick her son up to go to the Dr. Emory, yeah. But when she gets back, Gavin is already home from work. She sees his car in driving, and she feels like, okay, this is a foretelling of bad things to come. And before she can enter the house, Jamie is speeding out of the house. He's angry, his face is splotchy, and he's looking with so much anger and hatred at his mom. And it's like, oh, you've ruined everything. You've ruined everything. And she's like, I don't get, like, why are you like this? What went wrong? And He doesn't answer her, he just storms off and leaves her then driving. And then she enters the house and Gavin is waiting for her. He prepares a drink for her, which she says she doesn't want, but he forces her to drink nonetheless. And then this sequence, like this whole spiel, comes out of his mouth, and it's the most horrifying like moment. You know, the moment where you truly see what Gavin and what Jean had to endure as an underage kid married to a man that intentionally, you know, um, took advantage of her. Well, taking advantage is always intentional, but this just feels very, very intense, like double the taking the advantage. Like it seems innocuous when it starts, but it's not really innocuous because Jean is like scared. But Gavin blocks her and then he starts with the question. Did you ever wonder why I married you, Jean? And Jean describes this question as the greatest insecurity, the greatest her greatest source of insecurity. Her fear that she had never been good enough for her doctor husband. I was too stunned to speak. And Gavin continues with more kindness. I don't mean to bring up a sensitive point here, but we both knew what people said. That I married beneath me, an uneducated girl with a from a deprived background. A girl who tried so hard it was almost embarrassing, but still couldn't hide what she was. And at this point, Jean is ready to flee. Remember how I said like how Ali accused Jean of always running away when things were like got too serious, like in her brain. Well, with Gavin, she can't run away because he literally holds her to the spot in a crushing grip, and he continues assaulting her with his very, very heartless words. And why? People wondered. Sure, little Ginny was attractive enough but hardly beautiful, and her attempts at fashion, though certainly earnest, were almost laughable. Like you have to notice how Gavin brings up her fashion, which makes sense later. But let's just keep going. And Jane is begging, crying at least, like she's sobbing, but she can't escape because Gavin is gripping, crushing her wrist. So don't you want to know the reason? The real reason why I sought out little Jane Ginny at that concert. Took her to dinner in elegant restaurants where she had no idea which fork to use. Bought her the biggest, gaudiest diamond ring I could find. And against my will, I felt myself nodding. Now Jane is telling, saying, thinking. Yes, she's thinking to herself. She doesn't say it to Gavin. Yes, I wanted to know. The question had haunted me. Why had Gavin chosen me? And how long would it take before he realized his mistake? How long before he sent me back to the desolation of my former life with my troubled, clumsy son in tow? So you see that Jean has some deep rooted fear or being thrown out in the street with her son. She feels like Gavin would automatically reject her son. And she also sees her son as a flaw that only by herself she could not possibly handle. And he continues, because I thought I could trust you, that's why. And trust is very important to me, Jane. You might say it's everything to me. But you could trust me, I protested. You can't, Gavin. And she begs him to let go of her. And then it's like he's woken from his trance and he releases his grip on her. But he continues with his wicked words. Of course, we've had our differences. He says, you know, I've never approved of the way you've handled the boy, the way you cuddle him and feed his addictive behaviors. But I always believed you had the family's interests at heart. You were just misguided, like you were when you showed up for work at the hospital in some of those silly outfits. Like after 17 years of marriage, he still hasn't forgotten how bad she looked when they first met. But okay. But how could I blame you? You were just acting out what you knew. Jean is begging, but there's nothing she says that makes sense, even to her, to this Gavin's assault. And then she started thinking, as usual, I was no longer sure that Gavin was wrong. No longer sure that I wasn't the cause of Jamie's burgeoning problems, Gavin was listening only to himself. I always thought you understood how important my reputation was in this town, how important his family's reputation was. Really, what does a doctor have but his good name? As he begins to stammer, suddenly it all made sense. Almost forgetting my husband was in the room, I walked to the phone and pressed the play button on the answering machine. There were two messages from Jamie's friends that hadn't been erased from the day before, and one that had come in this morning. A message that Gavin had obviously heard before I had time to intercept it. Before Dr. Emery's secretary could finish her routine message reminding us of Jamie's appointment the following day, I pressed erase. But it was still a full minute before I gathered the courage to turn and face Gavin. I could feel his eyes drilling me, accusing me, hating me. I was going to tell you, I said when I finally turned to face him. I swear I was, Gavin. I was going to tell you tonight. But Gavin was already shaking his head. Don't insult me by lying, Jane. I wouldn't have known until it was too late. Too late for what? God, Gavin, I was taking Jane to talk to someone, not for a lobotomy. Did you hear what I just said about reputation? Dr. Emery is a colleague of mine, Jane, Gavin said with his usual self-important air. She might be a stranger to you, but I see her at the hospital nearly every day. Jamie's visit will be confidential. You know that, Gavin. It's not like the woman will be whispering about him or us in the hospital hallways. The only professional Jamie needs to talk to is a good nutritionist. And that's one thing you'd never allow, isn't it? You're wrong, Gavin, I blurted out, anger overcoming fear for once. Jamie has problems neither of us ever suspected. Serious problems. Maybe you never suspected them, Jim, but I've been warning you about the potential consequences of your actions for years. So he continues to blame her for Jamie's mental issues. Now it's gotten to the point the boy has committed some serious offenses. Offenses that could destroy his life if anyone found out. My head spun. He knew. Gavin knew everything. Who told you? I asked in a weak voice. Heard it from the horse's mouth, actually. And so that will explain Jamie's embarrassment, humiliation, and anger. Seeing his mother in the driveway because he had already confessed everything to a father that punishes him for just existing. So imagine how grating and um, disgusting he would have handled. How disgustingly he would have handled Jamie's just honest confession of his crimes, or yeah, it's a crime. But what if he does? Or if it's someone else next time? Gavin, we can't just ignore. I told you he won't. He made a mistake, Gina, and one that wasn't entirely provoked. And it's like Gina is like questioning him in this small part. Like, are you saying it's Alice's fault that he broke into her house and stole her things? Gavin shrugged. I'm not absolving Jamie entirely, but obviously the woman thrives on things like that. So now you are blaming Brian's death on Ali too. Brian's death does not concern me, Jane. Ali does not concern me. The only thing that concerns me here is my son. If, on the other hand, you insist on involving outsiders, you never know where this might lead. And so I said defeatedly, you cancelled the appointment. I told the secretary the problem has been taken care of and it has. I nodded silently, not looking up at him. And please don't attempt to reschedule Jane because Jamie has already told me he'll refuse to go. And obviously, Jane comes to her regular programming. Clearly, Gavin was right. The only time she could remember feeling so hopeless was when she had peered at her brother's lifeless body in the casket, when she had furtively touched his cheek and felt not the warmth of the boy she knew, but the hardness of wood, metal, the rocky earth. Like, there's something that strikes me now that I know a lot of things that you guys don't know. There's something that strikes me the way Gavin irrationally does not want Jamie to talk with his colleague, Dr. Emery. It's like, fine, even if you're scared of your reputation, yeah, like, oh, you want your family to look picture perfect, squeaky clean, like, okay, but I feel like Jamie knows something. It's still coming up that Jamie knows something And Gavin is scared that in a heart-to-heart talk with a professional, Jamie might let sleep be something that he knows. And that something that he knows might be at the root of why and his father they have this kind of horrid connection. I feel like the same way Jean has secret with Jamie is the same way Jamie is also carrying the burden of his father's secret. But the way James is carrying his burden, the burden of his father's secrets probably is in a shameful way. Like when you know something about somebody that is bad about the person, but the person is so stuck up in their own self, and they are so they have so much power over you, you know, in the sense that you can't help but feel wrong for just knowing such a secret. And this type of thing occurs in like families, children knowing the secret of their parents, but like instead of having the understanding, to see it as a flaw on the parent, they personalize it as a flaw on themselves, you know, and knowing it as a flaw on themselves might make him, you know, express this hateful, violent behaviors, like watching the violent pornography, like having like eating disorders, stuffing himself, never full and everything, and then stalking his teacher, defacing her property, stealing her properties, and claiming it is all a crush. All of that is it speaks of something much, much insidious. Now we've gotten another major event that we now know why Gavin married Jean. So this chapter 16, Jean is now left alone at home. In this chapter, Jean um discovers something, and it also happens in this quest of events. So recently, Jean she mentions it here that Gavin has been leaving her alone for lengthy periods of time, which is like as she mentions it, the way she mentions it doesn't feel like she has any suspicions, but it feels like it's just unusual for him. But as usual, when she tries to ask Gavin, curious about his work, he's a doctor and he's going for medical conferences all over the country. He's going for one in Cleveland, he's going to one in Dallas, he's going to one in Iowa, all of those places. And she's like, what is going on? Like what is the conference is about? And he's just like shut her down, as usual, looking down on her, like, oh, your stupid brain cannot comprehend that I am a doctor. I need to up my knowledge and understanding of my profession, else the young ones are going to take over my job. Please. It's not something I expect you to understand. And she just like, all right, packs his bags, collects the number of the hotel where he's staying for an emergency, possibly, and waves goodbye to him. That's just literally her routine. But this day is different because this weekend is different because Jamie is also leaving the house. She's hit by a manic energy and fear, the same kind she had when she first combed her son's room. What she does is searching. So she begins to search the whole house. She doesn't know what she's searching for, but she has to search the whole house. And she starts searching, but she tells herself it's a little spring cleaning, that if Gavin asks, she'll just say she's doing spring cleaning or whatever. So she combs through Jamie's room once again, although she's so fucking scared that she's doing, because she's scared of what she'll find. Luckily for her, she didn't find anything. She searched. And then as she's searching, she begins to rationalize Gavin's madness, Gavin's insane train of thought that Ali, probably seduced her son. She didn't say it directly, but she says with her short skirt and boots, her hair curled seductively over one shoulder. It was no wonder that the vulnerable adolescent boy had been captivated. It was almost as if she had unconsciously lured Jamie into her house, beckoning him with her pretty things, with the scent of lily she exuded. Okay, so that's just very sick and twisted. But like Jane's brain is not a normal brain anymore. She has been conditioned. So I give her a little bit of grace for that, like for that train of thought. Just a little bit of grace. So she searched her son and she's like, she doesn't see any suspicious. Now, in the house that they have, is a really big house. Like the house they live, Jamie, Gavin, and Jane. It's a really big house. 8 bedroom. It's a colonial style house, There's a particular room that Gavin calls his room, and he locks it. He locks it up, and he makes sure, because he's like the fear lord, he makes sure neither of them are ever curious um, about what is in there. He locks it too. But this particular day, something was worrying Jean. She said, "No, I must check this place." She says the only thing of interest I found was a small key tucked at the bottom of the sock drawer. Then when she saw it, she carefully put it back where she found it. So she says the next time she has a chance, but she would use that key to check to open that office, that particular room. He has an office, then he has a room where nobody goes. So she found the key through her magic searching. And then she says the opportunity comes weeks later when Gavin traveled again. You get Gavin traveled again, and yes, at this point, Jean had quit her job. Yeah, she had given a notice to the school, but since it's falling like the beginning of summer period, so she might as well just say goodbye at that point. And as she's there, she's thinking, she's at home that she's thinking to herself, of course, I had convinced myself that Gavin was right. You know, I almost even believed that quitting my job was my own idea. But still, it had an effect on her. She was lightheaded. Sorry, she was lightheaded and shaky as she left the school for the last time. That weekend, as she goes home, the opportunity that came is like Gavin announced he was going to Burlington, Vermont for the weekend. Apparently, he was meeting with another doctor to discuss a new surgical technique that was being used on athletes with serious knee injuries. When she expressed interest, as usual, Gavin says it's not something that's easy to explain to a lay person. And she backed down as always. But this particular interaction, so I don't know if the timeline is clear. She found the key in the sock drawer a particular weekend that her husband was not home. And then when she found the key in the sock drawer, she kept it back there. And she waited for a chance to search the room when her husband is properly not at home. The reason why she's at home when her husband is at work is because she had already turned in a 2 weeks notice, a quick notice. So she's at home, and she's just by herself. She's going to stay clean. So she starts searching or cleaning the house. And then she finds the key. So I hope you get that sequence. And then 2 weeks later, chance comes for her to use that key, which is when her husband is going for a conference in Vermont, Burlington, and he's doing blah 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 surgical learning blah blah blah. Anyways, she waves him goodbye and she goes there. Oh, her son too. This particular weekend, her son is not staying at home because he's angry at her. So he drops her. She drops him off at his friend Brad's, and then she goes to a bar, Hannibal's again. She takes like 2 glasses of alcohol, Cosmos. I don't know what that drink is, but it's a Cosmos. And as she's there, she keeps thinking about her husband's arrogant expression, or she thinks about her son ignoring her, like he doesn't exist. And then she's like, I was tired of both of them and their secrets. So I keep saying, Gavin and Jamie have secrets that they're not sharing with her. So she goes back and she tells herself, I would not back away from the truth this time. I walked downstairs and headed directly towards the locked door of the study. She starts to think about the very first time she even tried to enter it, like he prevented her from coming into the room, even from the first moment he built the room or built the study. Anyway, she says she makes her way towards the room with the same alcohol fortified determination that she had marshaled when I peeked through my son's possession. I hope you understand why I'm saying she and I. It's not, it all yielded. She says, I hadn't entered more than 3 times in 10 years. So she felt like something stopped her. No matter how careful I was, I knew Gavin would sense my intrusion. But this time, the thought of Gavin's irritation gave me nothing but pleasure. So every time Gavin is like away from her, her brain comes correct. But when he's in her vicinity, oh, it's over for her. Anyway, she goes into the room, she sees books, she sees her husband grouping books obsessively. She describes it as an obsessive grouping. in sizes from small to large, as in his textbooks. And then she says she gives a quick scan of the documents saved in his computer. And she says he revealed nothing but a highly detailed budget that was too boring to read. She adds, my husband was so cheap and meticulous. He kept track of every cup of coffee he bought in the hospital cafeteria. Feeling bored, I shut the computer down and stared at the blank screen. I went onto the desk and began to go through the drawers. That search revealed nothing but her husband's almost pathological orderliness. The thought of Gavin taking the time to line up paper clips or to make sure that each pencil stored in a mug was sharpened to a perfect point filled me with revulsion. So she reaches the final drawer of the desk and it is locked. She attempted to pry it open. She could not. Is interrupted by Sharon. And Sharon is looking at her. Sharon gives her chocolate. Kind of a greeting for her quitting her job in the sense of like, I don't know, maybe pity or something. And then she asks her that, Jean, is everything all right? And Jean thinks to herself, why did people keep asking me that question? She sounded like Judge Martha. Well, of course, everything is all right, I said, unable to keep the irritation out of my voice. I was doing just a little cleaning, that's all. And Sharon is like, okay, like, let's back up. Anyway, she backs up. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bad it. It's just that all your lights were on and your car was in the driveway. Again, with the lights being on. I think the lights being on is just like a tell on Jean's fear that she cannot even put a hand to. It feels like there's something she's scared of. The truth that is like overwhelmingly present in the house. She's so scared of it. And Sharon goes, looking at, she's looking at Jean and she's like, my God, Jean, you're shaking. Are you sure you're all right? Because if you ever needed to talk, well, people say I'm a pretty good listener. I'm fine, I said curtly, accepting the gift. And she starts to usher Sharon to the door. I guess leaving the job was harder than I thought it would be. It's been a rough day, Sharon, but I really do appreciate the chocolates. And Sharon left quickly, saying all the right things, but nothing could mask the concern in her eyes. She looks at herself in the mirror, that's Jean, and she describes herself as the mad woman who had finally escaped from the attic. The mad woman who had finally escaped from the attic. So the next day is what? Sunday, and Jamie and Gavin were scheduled to arrive in a few hours. And then she thinks to herself, I discovered it. The telltale item I had been looking for without knowing it. After all my feverish searching, it was right in the open. Perhaps the way the truth had been all along, if only I had allowed myself to see it. Then she begins to connect 2 plus 2 is 4. This is a hotel towel from Park Plaza. That's the name of the inn or the hotel. And she says, though consciously I was still resisting the associations the word conjured, I immediately began to tremble. Neither Gavin nor I had been to New York in years and never to the Park Plaza, but I knew someone who had. Ali. Ali had been luxuriously ensconced at the Park Plaza when Brian Shagori hung a rope from the ceiling fan in a depressing motel and ended his life. Was it possible that Jamie had been in the house since then and taking the wash clothes as in from Ali's house? Was he baiting me by leaving it in the linen closet instead of hiding in his room the way the shoebox had been? She suspects Jamie this time. You know the last time she suspected Gavin and Ali for the CD, and then she found out it was Jamie, that was stalking Ali and stole the CD from her house. Now she's suspecting that maybe Jamie is up to his prank, taking two pranks, I see, taking Ali's hotel too well or something, and she dismisses it because she has already searched Jamie's room exhaustively and she did not see anything after that day. So now she says she's just standing there thinking when an image suddenly flashed before my eyes. I saw Gavin standing with Ali at the concert at the Cape, his eyes full of obvious appreciation, which we've already gone over. Almost against my will, the connections began to come. If Brian Shigari hadn't committed suicide the weekend the quartet had played in New York, of course, I wouldn't have remembered it so clearly. But because it had been marked by tragedy, I remembered every detail of the weekend. That weekend, he claimed to be attending a conference in Cleveland. Looking feverishly through my appointment book, my hands trembling uncontrollably, I found the exact date. Penciled beneath it was the name of the hotel and the number Gavin left for her in case of an emergency. Knowing the chance I would call him was practically zero, but still, she calls this number and she says, "Hello, is this the Sheraton?" It's like, the what? The person on the other end of the line is like, the what? He says Sheraton, Sheraton in Cleveland, because that's where the hotel Gavin told her the hotel would be. And the person is like, is this a joke? This is Boca Raton. This is Boca Raton, Florida here. Sorry to have disturbed you, blah blah blah. And then she cuts the call. I read back the number that Gavin had written in his clear hand just to make sure there was no mistake. In creating the false number, he hadn't even bothered to look up the area code for Cleveland. My first instinct was to call her, that is Ali, and confront her. There was a nagging doubt. What if I was wrong? I reassessed the evidence I had collected. Fact one, someone in my house had gotten a hold of a watch clip from a hotel where Ali had stayed on the recent weekend. Fact two, my husband had lied about his whereabouts on the same weekend, though it was pretty incriminating. It proved nothing. But needing answers and needing them, I no longer cared if I looked like a fool before Ali. And then she tries to call Ali, but Ali is not at home. Ali has come for another show. And then she thinks. She now thought her mind now made a connection to the locked drawer in that private room. And she decides to call a locksmith. Now she goes through the yellow pages, so that will tell you the timeline of the story. They still use the yellow pages. So she goes through the yellow pages and she found a locksmith. And she called him and said she'll pay him anything, that she's sick, her drugs are in the drawer, blah blah blah. Anyway, she said she has seizure, blah 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 blah. And then the guy opens the thing for her and he's just standing there. He's like, go. She pays him and she drives, shows him out of the house. Then she yanked it open with such force that the content, all paperwork, spilled across the floor. To my surprise and momentary relief, I found nothing but bills among the loose papers. Gavin insisted on paying them himself, never letting me near the checkbook he used for our electric bill and mortgage payment. So you see how Gavin is financially abusing Jim in that sense. Like, she has no control, she has no knowledge of, even if she does, but she doesn't really have any sense of how to pay the bills in their house, like mortgage and electric bill. Like, simple as electric bill, Gavin does not let her near, which is sick. For my own personal expenses, forage to the mall, payment for Jamie's various activities, I had my own account. So she says, let her just look through it. The first few were the same ones that Gavin left for me to mail in an orderly stack at the beginning of the month. The insurance for house and car and TV and mortgage. But then I came across a bill I had never seen before. Opening it, I realized it was for a Visa card I never knew Gavin had. My first thought was to wonder why he never left the bill with the rest of the stack when he asked me to mail them out. However, as soon as I read through the itemized charges, it all became clear. In fact, the whole miserable lie that was my marriage became clear. The first thing that caught my eye was the charge made at the Park Plaza on the weekend when Brian Shagari had killed himself. Oh, they keep repeating this thing. Though I had wanted the truth, I felt nauseated with the sense of betrayal that rose up when I pondered the charges my husband and Ali had run up at the hotel that weekend. I pictured room service, long breakfast in bed, bottles of Dom Perignon at night. Later, of course, I will look through the bill more carefully, finding charges to hotels in every city where Alice Quartet had played. Oddly enough, it wasn't my husband's betrayal that drove me to the bathroom, where I threw up the gin I had gulped in the kitchen. It was Alice. It was my best friend. By the time I made my way upstairs, the burning taste of the gin had thrown up in my mouth. I felt dizzy. I had reached the top landing when I heard it, the last movement of Alice Paradise Suite sneaking out the bathroom door and down the hallway, enveloping me in a seductive melody. Without caring what I broke or who saw it, I picked up the CD player and helped it down the stairs, silencing Alice's music once and for all. So that's chapter 17. Yeah. So in this chapter, the great reveal was that Jean found out that Ali and her husband were having an affair because Ali was at the same hotel that Gavin, through his bills that he keeps. Why did he keep? Why does he keep those bills? Like, do people keep hotel charges bills or something? Anyway, through the bills, she finds that her husband was also at the same hotel the same weekend, you know, and it just makes things connect in her brain, and all of that. Oh, and then the way she talks about throwing the CD and silencing Alice music once and for all, like throwing the stereo and smashing it to pieces, silencing Alice music, it kind of, mm, 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 I don't want to say anything that would spoil it, but yeah. So far, I feel like the story is an up and down kind of story. And so I want to end it here. Look forward to the next review installment. Bye bye.